The story begins with a small research team from Earth traveling through space on a long mission. They were not soldiers or adventurers. They were ordinary people who had studied the stars their whole lives and finally got the chance to see them up close. Their ship moved slowly and quietly through a region that looked empty, calm, and harmless. The crew felt proud because they had traveled farther than any human before them. Every night they took turns looking out through the viewing panels, watching tiny lights float in a dark sea, feeling as if the whole universe had opened its doors for them. The mission had gone smoothly for months. The team had grown comfortable with their routine. They collected data, fixed small issues on the ship, shared stories during meals, and recorded messages for their families back on Earth. Even though they were far away from home, they still felt connected. The silence of space did not scare them. In fact, it gave them a sense of peace. But that peace did not last. One day, the navigation system began showing strange numbers. At first, the crew thought it was a glitch. Instruments sometimes misread data when the ship passed through pockets of cosmic dust, so no one worried at the beginning. The pilot tried resetting the system, only to see the readings shift even more. Speed values suddenly changed. The star map didn't match anything they had seen before. And then, almost too quietly, a small red warning light turned on near the bottom of the console. The crew gathered around the controls. They spoke softly, asking each other if anyone had touched the settings or run any test that might explain the issue. No one had. The warning light grew brighter, and the air inside the ship felt different. It was not fear, yet just discomfort. The kind a person feels when they know something is wrong, but can't explain it. The pilot attempted a course correction, hoping to return to familiar space. But every time they tried, the ship kept drifting slightly to the right, almost as if something was pushing it. The engines responded normally. The ship hummed the same way it always did, yet the path they followed changed little by little. It didn't feel dangerous, only strange, like walking in a fog with no idea what lies ahead. As hours passed, the stars outside began to shift. These were not the patterns they had studied back on Earth. One of the scientists zoomed in on a cluster of lights and frowned. He had never seen those arrangements in any database. He searched again, hoping the ship's star catalog would identify them, but the system returned nothing. The realization came quietly and slowly. They had drifted into a part of space no human had ever mapped. The crew tried reaching mission control on Earth. They sent a message and waited. Usually, it took a few minutes for a reply because of the distance. But this time, minutes passed with complete silence. They sent another message, then another. Still nothing. Slowly, tension settled in the room. They had always known that deep space travel was unpredictable, but they had never imagined losing communication with Earth completely. The team began whispering now, not because they needed to, but because the unfamiliar silence around them felt too heavy for loud voices. While they were discussing what to do next, something unexpected happened. A soft, distant pulse appeared on the radar. It blinked once, then disappeared. The operator ran a scan, and the pulse returned this time stronger. It was not a natural signal. It was structured, steady, and deliberate. Someone was out there. The crew stared at the screen as more pulses appeared, forming a pattern that grew faster by the second. One of them leaned back in shock as multiple objects came into view. They were moving fast, closing the distance with sharp precision that made everyone's heart jump. The ship's window slowly filled with shapes smooth, metallic, and nothing like Earth's spacecraft. They were arranged in a curved formation, surrounding the human ship from different angles. Not a single one fired or showed signs of aggression. They simply appeared, silent and controlled, as if they had been watching the humans for a long time. The pilot tried hailing them through the communication channel, speaking calmly, introducing the crew, stating that they were peaceful explorers. The only response was a soft vibration that passed through the human ship. It rattled a few tools on the desk, but didn't harm anything. The lights flickered briefly, as if the surrounding ships were scanning every detail of the human vessel. The research team exchanged nervous glances. They didn't know what these new arrivals wanted. They didn't know if they understood human language. The only thing certain was that they were no longer alone. Their ship's controls suddenly shifted without being touched. The engines powered down by themselves. The navigation system reset, flashing unfamiliar symbols across the screen. The pilot tried overriding the commands, but the controls refused to respond. Now it was clear they were being guided. The human ship began moving forward, slowly but firmly, as if caught in a tow. The surrounding crafts adjusted their positions with flawless coordination, keeping a perfect distance on all sides. The team watched the scene in disbelief. None of them had ever imagined first contact happening this way, silent, controlled, and without any chance to resist or question doubt as they were carried deeper into this unknown region. They saw a massive structure slowly appear in the distance. It was larger than any space station built by humans. It stretched across the darkness like a floating city, glowing softly with colors they had never seen before. Long beams of light extended from its edges, forming shapes that looked both artistic and powerful. The crew felt a mix of awe and fear. They whispered about whether this structure might be some kind of government center or military base. But the more they looked, the more they realized it wasn't built to intimidate. It was built to impress, almost like a place designed for gathering or trade. The ship was guided toward an entrance that opened smooth and wide, glowing with a soft blue shimmer. As they passed through, the space inside lit up in layers, revealing platforms, towers, and pathways shaped with a level of technology far beyond human understanding. When their ship finally stopped, a calm light filled the interior, almost like a welcome. There were no alarms, no shouting, no threatening gestures. Just a quiet signal telling them to step out. At that moment, the crew understood the truth. They had crossed a boundary they never knew existed. The quiet, empty region they thought was unclaimed space belonged to someone powerful, organized, and watching. Earth had always looked up at the stars with wonder, thinking the universe was waiting for humans to explore it. But now, standing in front of a civilization that had been here long before them, they realized something important. Humans had wandered into a vast galactic dominion without knowing it. And now, they would have to explain themselves to a world that had no idea who they were, what they wanted, or why they had crossed into their territory. The crew took a deep breath, each feeling the same thought settle in their minds. Everything had changed, and the future of their entire species might depend on what happened next. Back on Earth, the missing ship became a growing worry. At first, Mission Control believed it was a simple communication issue. Space weather often disrupted signals, and the team on the ground had learned not to panic too quickly. They sent follow-up messages, repeated the same instructions, and waited for a reply that never came. Hours turned into a full day. A group of specialists gathered in a room filled with screens, cables, blinking consoles, and silent tension. They replayed the last message from the crew again and again. The audio was broken, full of sharp noise, but a single line kept repeating, "We are seeing unknown," and then everything cut off. No one knew what they had seen. No one knew where the ship had gone. Every attempt to trace their signal led to empty space. By the second day, Earth space agencies issued a public statement saying that the research team was out of contact, but not confirmed lost. Families gathered in large halls, waiting, hoping, listening to every update. Reporters appeared outside the mission center, searching for any detail that might explain the silence. The world held its breath, but the missing crew were alive, standing inside the giant structure that belonged to an advanced civilization. They felt extremely small as they looked at the surroundings. The hall they stood in had no corners, no metal panels, no wires. Everything was smooth, curved, and glowing softly from within. The air felt lighter than the air on their ship. A faint sound, something like distant wind or a soft hum, filled the space. The crew whispered among themselves, wondering if this place was some kind of political center or scientific facility. They didn't know whether the beings who brought them here were angry, curious, or simply following a protocol. They only knew they were far from home, in a place built by a society that clearly had more technology than humans could ever dream of. A moment later, a wall in front of them opened. Not like a door, but more like water parting. A tall figure stepped forward, moving with calm, controlled motions. The figure did not look threatening. Its posture was steady and thoughtful, almost peaceful. The crew couldn't tell whether it was a leader or a representative, but it was clear that this was not a random encounter. This was an official meeting. The being raised a hand, not to command, but to signal quiet. A soft projection appeared in the air between them, symbols and shapes that resembled language, but were impossible to read. The being rotated the symbols, changed their shapes, and tested different forms as if trying to find something that humans could understand. The crew tried speaking in simple words, repeating phrases like, "peaceful mission," and "we come from Earth." They pointed to themselves, and then toward the distant stars, trying to show that they were travelers, not intruders. But it wasn't clear whether the being understood. Eventually, the projection shifted into a simple star map. The being tapped a glowing point that represented its own territory. Then, with one slow motion, it highlighted the trail the human ship had taken, an accidental drift that crossed into the Dominion's borders. Message was clear, even without words. Had crossed into restricted space. The crew felt their stomachs tighten. They had not meant to violate any boundary. They hadn't even known it existed. But from the perspective of this civilization, it probably looked careless, or worse, intentional. On Earth, while leaders struggled to understand what happened, more signals began appearing in the outer regions of the solar system. Strange echoes, faint pulses, and patterns that didn't match anything natural. At first, the scientists thought they were reading random noise. But then the pulses repeated, slow, steady, and controlled. They were too perfect to be random. Earth responded with caution. More listening stations were activated, and deep space antennas turned toward the source. The signals kept coming, spreading slowly, almost like the first steps of someone knocking at a door. The public grew restless. Some people were excited, imagining that humanity might finally be meeting beings from another world. Others were anxious, worried that Earth might not be ready. The uncertainty created long discussions on news programs, in classrooms, and even in markets and bus stations. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. Inside the Dominion, the human crew continued to communicate as best as they could. Over time, they noticed that the beings watching them were not unkind. They were strict, careful, and quiet in their actions, but not hostile. They provided breathable air, food-like supplies, and a sleeping area that felt surprisingly comfortable. This made the crew wonder whether the Dominion had dealt with visitors before, or if they had simply prepared for the possibility long ago. During one rest cycle, the pilot looked around at the dimly lit room and said something that stayed with the group. "They're not treating us like attackers. They're treating us like people who made a mistake but need to be watched closely." And that felt true. Meanwhile, Earth attempted something bold. They broadcast a long message into space using multiple stations at once. The message included simple pictures, human figures, Earth's location, and a clear explanation that the lost ship had drifted by accident. The message was sent on repeat, every hour. 2 days later, the broadcast finally received an answer. It was a short reply, a simple returning pulse, but it followed the same rhythm Earth had used. For the first time, Earth knew for certain that someone out there was listening. And more importantly, they knew that someone understood the attempt to communicate. The world reacted with a mixture of relief and shock. Some cried with joy. Some felt nervous. Some fell silent, unable to process the reality that Earth was no longer alone in the galaxy. Global leaders formed a special group, a council built quickly from scientists, linguists, engineers, and representatives from different countries. They stayed awake through long nights, trying to prepare a response that might smooth the situation instead of escalating it. The most important goal was simple: show honesty, show respect, and show that humans had no harmful intentions. Back in the Dominion structure, the crew received a small moment of hope. The being who had first appeared returned with a projection showing Earth's broadcast. The symbols were different now. The map was clearer. It showed the path of the signal traveling across space to reach the HFY Dominion. The crew realized something important. The Dominion had understood Earth's message. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The crew felt it not in the air, but in the quiet way the beings moved. There was less tension, less distance. They still didn't know whether they would be allowed to go home soon, but they felt a tiny opening, a chance that this would not end in disaster. Later, while they rested, one of the scientists whispered something that made the others think deeply. She said, "Maybe they're just as confused about us as we are about them. Maybe we're the unknown ones to them. Maybe they're trying to decide what we are." This thought changed how the crew behaved. They moved with care. They spoke softly. They tried to show patience and understanding. They wanted the Dominion to see humans as calm, curious, and honest. But tension wasn't gone entirely. There were still beings who walked by with guarded expressions. There were still quiet discussions happening in corners, with gestures the humans couldn't interpret. It was clear that not everyone in the Dominion welcomed the idea of humans entering their borders, even by accident. Back on Earth, debates grew stronger. Some people demanded the government prepare defense systems. Others begged for a peaceful approach. Some simply prayed, hoping that the beings out there were compassionate rather than strict or aggressive. Earth's leaders knew one thing: any wrong move could be misunderstood. The next response Earth sent included voice, images, and data showing the ship's unintended drift. They hoped this would be enough to build trust. At the same time, the Dominion's council, located deep within the massive station, reviewed everything they had learned about humans so far. They saw that humans were emotional, curious, unpredictable, but not immediately dangerous. They also saw that humans were willing to admit mistakes. That mattered. The crew inside the Dominion began to sense a shift. The lights in the hallways grew warmer. The beings made more eye contact and moved less slowly around them. One even handed them a device that translated simple symbols into shapes the humans could understand. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. For the first time since leaving Earth, the crew felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this situation could be resolved peacefully. Maybe humans would return home with a story no one on Earth would ever forget. But they also knew one important truth. Everything now depended on how well both sides could communicate, understand, and trust each other. It was not just about surviving. It was about proving that humans belonged on the galactic stage, not as invaders, not as troublemakers, but as explorers who made a mistake and were willing to fix it. The story of the crew had already traveled across space. The next steps would shape the relationship between two worlds, two civilizations, and two ways of thinking. And the crew, standing quietly inside the heart of the Dominion, felt the weight of that future resting on their shoulders. The news of the alien signals shook Earth more than anything in modern history. People had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, and now the question had an answer. It was not a movie, not a rumor, not a theory. It was real. A distant power was out there, and they had the missing human crew in their center. Every country, every institution, every ordinary person suddenly felt that they had a stake in this moment. Humanity's next steps could change everything. In the mission center, experts sat around long tables, surrounded by screens showing the alien pulses, decoded patterns, and the last clear message from the crew. They listened to it again, just to remind themselves what was at risk. The voice from the ship said, "We're being guided into a structure. We're safe for now." The pause afterward felt heavy. No one knew what came next. Earth formed a negotiation team. They didn't know if the aliens used spoken language, written language, or only symbols. But they had to try. The team included scientists, communication experts, and individuals who had experience with diplomacy. They were told to stay calm under pressure, think clearly, and always show peaceful intent. Meanwhile, the missing crew in the Dominion felt the days stretch long and heavy. At first, every hour felt like a test. Every movement, every breath, every small decision made them worry they might accidentally offend the beings watching them. But gradually, they began sensing subtle changes in how the Dominion treated them. The beings no longer observed them from a distance. They walked closer, stood near the projection tables, and even reached out to take the tools the humans were holding. The shift was small, but it meant something important. The Dominion was trying to understand them, not push them away. One of the crew members noticed that the beings often watched their expressions carefully. When a human smiled softly or nodded, the beings paused, almost as if studying the gesture. It made the humans realize they had to be very careful about what they showed on their faces. A smile could be seen as respect, or it could be seen as discomfort. They had no way to know. The most challenging part was not knowing the Dominion's thoughts. Their faces had a calm stillness that didn't reveal emotions clearly. Sometimes the crew wondered if the beings were curious or cautious or both at once. But deep down, the humans hoped that the Dominion saw them as people, not intruders. One day, the same tall figure from before returned with a larger projection. This time, the map showed Earth's broadcast clearly. It displayed the human attempt to explain the accidental border crossing. The crew felt relief wash over them. If the Dominion showed them this message, it meant they were at least considering Earth's explanation. The tall figure then pointed to the map, slowly tracing the path of the human ship. After a moment, it highlighted several points in space, probably the Dominion's borders. It wasn't angry or blaming. It seemed to be showing that humans had entered a protected zone unknowingly. The meaning was clear. The Dominion now understood. It was an accident. This was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. Back on Earth, the negotiation team waited for another signal. When the alien reply finally came, it was longer than before. Not just a pulse this time, but a structured pattern that repeated several times, as if the Dominion wanted Earth to understand it fully. Scientists studied it for hours. The message was complex, but after careful comparison with earlier signals, they came to a conclusion that made everyone breathe easier. The Dominion was acknowledging the communication attempt. The next step was to send a negotiation vessel, not a warship, not a fast craft, just a symbolic shuttle to show trust. It carried a small group of representatives, each chosen because they were calm, patient, and trained to work under pressure. The ship traveled slowly, with open signals and no defensive systems activated. Earth wanted to show honesty. As it moved out of the solar system, millions of people watched the live updates. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for a sign that this mission would not end in fear. Inside the Dominion, The crew felt the atmosphere grow more serious. The calm blue lights in the halls shifted to a softer tone, almost like the place was preparing for an important meeting. The tall figure returned and pointed to a new projection showing Earth's negotiation vessel approaching Dominion space. The humans' hearts jumped. This meant the Dominion knew about the ship and was allowing it to come closer. This was a good sign. But the Dominion was not a simple civilization. Every decision took time, discussion, and caution. Based on their behavior, it seemed they were used to organizing large systems with strict boundaries. They were probably divided into groups or councils that shared responsibility for major choices. This meant that the decision to allow Earth's representatives inside their territory was not taken lightly. While waiting, the crew spent long hours talking among themselves. They wondered how Earth must be reacting. They talked about the families waiting for them. They talked about their ship drifting into unknown space. They even laughed quietly about small things in an attempt to feel human again. Despite everything, they wanted to hold on to their normal behavior because it reminded them of home. On Earth, people gathered around televisions, screens, and radios. Some had hope. Some had fear. Some didn't know how to feel. Religious groups prayed. Scientists discussed theories about the Dominion. News anchors tried to present calm updates even as their voices shook. The negotiation vessel finally reached the border region. Sensors showed several unknown crafts following it at a distance. The vessel's crew remained calm, knowing that any panic could send the wrong message. The unknown crafts maintained perfect formation, neither too close nor too far. A silent reminder that the Dominion was watching every move. Inside the Dominion station, the crew watched the new projection show the Earth vessel's steady approach. They could see the Dominion's crafts guiding it, just as they themselves had been guided earlier. The humans felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. This was the first time in history that Earth was sending representatives to meet another civilization. Everything depended on how both sides behaved in the next few hours. One of the crew members whispered something thoughtful. "We're not just visitors anymore. We're the bridge." That idea stuck with them. When the negotiation vessel finally reached the Dominion's main station, a huge entrance lit up again with soft lights. The humans inside the Dominion watched it happen from a distance, knowing that this moment might decide whether they would ever go home. Earth's representatives stepped out slowly. Their hands were open, their posture relaxed. They didn't carry anything except a simple device with visual recordings of Earth, human culture, peaceful scenes, and messages explaining more about the accidental border crossing. The Dominion's tall figure approached them with the same calm steps it used when meeting the missing crew. It raised its hand in a gesture that looked almost like a greeting. The Earth representatives responded by bowing slightly, not wanting to offend. This was the moment when humanity proved whether it deserved trust. The Dominion's council gathered a short distance away. They communicated among themselves through subtle gestures and light signals. The atmosphere felt dense, but not hostile. The humans felt like they were standing at the center of a giant courtroom, except no one was shouting and no one was angry. It was silent, thoughtful, and almost respectful. After what felt like a long time, the Dominion's tall figure activated a new projection. It showed Earth. It showed the research ship. It showed the path of drift. And then it showed something unexpected, a soft spiral shape, similar to the symbol they had used earlier to show understanding. The humans realized what it meant. The Dominion was beginning to believe them. This was not total acceptance, not complete trust, but the first step toward being recognized as honest explorers. Earth's representatives showed a recording of the missing crew's families, not to create sadness, but to show humanity's emotional depth. The Dominion watched quietly. The recording showed people waiting for news, children drawing pictures of the missing ship, communities lighting candles. Humans hoped the Dominion would understand that Earth cared about its people deeply. The Dominion didn't react dramatically, but something in their posture softened. They turned toward the missing crew and allowed them to step forward into the negotiation. Zone Dot, it was the first time since the accidental crossing that the crew felt free enough to walk without a guard behind. Then Dot, as they moved into the open space, they realized that Earth and the Dominion were now facing the same question. What kind of future would they build together? The negotiation had just begun, but one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer just a small species drifting through space. They were now fighting, not with weapons, but with honesty, patience, and hope to prove they deserved a place in the wider galaxy. And the whole universe seemed to be watching. The negotiation vessel had barely settled inside the Dominion station when the atmosphere changed again. It wasn't anything dramatic or loud. It happened quietly, almost like a shift in temperature or a soft breeze that no one could see. The lights along the curved walls dimmed for a moment. A faint vibration ran through the floor. The Dominion figures paused mid-step, looking at each other with concern. Even without understanding their language, the humans could feel something serious had just happened. The tall figure who had guided the missing crew raised its hand toward a distant wall. A new projection appeared, one larger than anything shown before. It displayed a region of space glowing with a strange brightness, almost like a star flickering in an unstable way. The humans stared at it, unsure of what they were seeing. The Dominion figures exchanged more gestures, their movements sharper and faster than before. It was the first time they had shown visible worry. Earth's representatives glanced at the missing crew, silently asking if they knew what was going on. But the crew only shook their heads. They were just as confused. The projection pulsed again, showing the glowing region expanding slowly. The humans immediately understood one thing. Whatever was happening out there was not good. It wasn't an attack, not a weapon, not anything created by a species. It looked natural, something born from the universe itself, dangerous. The tall figure turned toward the humans and made a sweeping motion with its hand, inviting them to follow. Without hesitation, the humans stepped forward. They knew this moment would decide how both sides worked together. If the Dominion trusted them enough to show this, then the humans needed to prove they were willing to help. They walked down a long corridor that curved downward like a spiral. The gentle hum grew louder. The walls changed color as they moved deeper into the station, shifting from blue to a warm gold tone. When they reached the end, they entered a large control room filled with oval platforms and floating screens. Dominion specialists stood around the platforms, touching glowing surfaces with steady movements. The projection of the unstable region hovered in the center of the room, larger than before. One of the Dominion specialists turned toward the humans and pointed at a smaller projection showing a nearby star system. It was pulsing irregularly, sending out waves of energy that spread outward. The pattern showed that the waves were slowly approaching the area between Earth and the Dominion. If the waves grew stronger, they could disrupt communication, destroy small ships, or cause major damage to anything caught in their path. The humans, both the missing crew and the negotiation team, stood silently absorbing the information. It wasn't a crisis only for the Dominion. Earth could be affected too. Suddenly, the situation was not aliens versus humans anymore. It was two civilizations facing the same threat. One of Earth's representatives stepped forward and gestured toward the projection, repeating simple motions that meant they wanted to help. The tall figure watched carefully, then nodded. That nod felt like a handshake, a sign of trust. The Dominion specialists created more projections, breaking down the information into smaller pieces so the humans could understand better. They showed how the unstable region formed, how it was spreading, and what needed to be done to stabilize it. The humans listened closely, studying every movement and symbol. They asked questions through gestures, and the Dominion did their best to answer. It was not perfect communication, but it was enough for both sides to understand the basics. The humans realized that this region of space needed a stabilizing structure, something like a shield that redirected the energy waves. But the Dominion system was old and needed repairs. They had been monitoring the region, but it had worsened faster than expected. The missing crew exchanged glances. They knew they had something valuable skills in engineering, physics, and problem solving. Their ship had been designed with flexible systems for exploring unknown territories. They understood improvisation, quick thinking, and practical solutions. The Dominion had advanced technology, but the humans had a unique way of approaching problems. One of the crew members stepped up and pointed to the stabilizing structure shown in the projection. Then he took out a small device from his pocket, one of the tools they had kept from their ship. He opened it, showing its inner design, and pointed at the projection again, suggesting an idea. The Dominion specialists leaned in, studying the device with interest. Slowly, almost like a bridge forming between two different worlds, both sides began working together on a new plan. The Dominion would provide their complex energy systems, and the humans would apply their flexible engineering methods to repair and strengthen the stabilizer. Hours passed with intense, focused activity. The room filled with soft lights, pulsing screens, and steady gestures as Dominion hands and human hands worked side by side. Despite the differences in appearance, movement, and technology, something remarkable was happening. Both sides were learning from each other. The humans began noticing things about the Dominion they hadn't seen before. When the Dominion specialists worked on delicate parts of the projection, their hands moved with incredible precision, almost like they could feel the energy. When something confused them, their eyes glowed faintly, and they paused to process the information. When they appreciated an idea, their shoulders relaxed slightly, and their posture shifted forward. These small details helped the humans understand their emotional language better. In return, the humans showed what made them unique. They sketched rough diagrams on a screen, combining simple shapes with quick ideas. They tested concepts quickly, even imperfect ones, to explore possibilities. They communicated with their hands, faces, and tone, expressing intent clearly. The Dominion specialists observed, sometimes tilting their heads in curiosity, sometimes nodding in approval. At one point, a Dominion specialist got stuck while adjusting a complex energy pattern. A human engineer stepped forward, offering a faster shortcut by rearranging a piece of the configuration. It was not perfect, but it worked long enough to stabilize the pattern. The Dominion specialist looked at the human with quiet respect. It was the first moment where both sides truly trusted each other's strengths. After many hours of concentrated work, the tall figure signaled that it was time to test the new stabilizer. A massive projection displayed the unstable region again. The Dominion activated a sequence of light pulses that traveled across the screen, representing the real machinery out in space. The humans held their breath. If the stabilizer failed, the waves could grow even stronger. The projection shifted. The glowing region pulsed again, releasing another wave of bright energy. The stabilizer responded, sending out a controlled field that met the wave head-on. For a moment, everything paused. The humans and Dominion specialists stared at the projection without blinking, and the wave began to slow. The brightness dimmed. The expanding line shrank inward. The stabilizer was working. The Dominion specialists exchanged gestures of relief. A few even stepped closer to the humans, making soft, acknowledging motions that felt like a form of gratitude. Earth's representatives couldn't believe it. They had worked with an alien civilization to solve a cosmic problem. This moment would become a part of human history. Forever, but more important. then the success itself was what it meant. The Dominion now saw humans differently. Were not just explorers who drifted off course. They were not a mistake that needed correction. They were not a threat that needed containment. They were partners unexpected, unpredictable, but willing to help and capable of contributing. The missing crew felt a deep sense of pride. They had been scared, uncertain, and far from home, but they had stayed calm and worked hard. Now they stood beside beings from a distant world, sharing a victory that neither side could have achieved alone. Earth's representatives watched the tall figure closely. Would this success change the Dominion's attitude? Would it open the door to friendship? Cooperation? The tall figure slowly approached the representatives, lifted its hand, and drew a soft spiral shape in the air, a familiar symbol they had seen earlier. But this time, the spiral glowed warmly, like a sign of trust. Humans felt the meaning instantly. This was acceptance. This was respect. This was the beginning of something new. The Dominion had finally recognized humanity as more than just visitors from a small planet. They had seen their heart, their courage, and their willingness to stand beside others in moments of danger. In the silent glow of the Dominion control room, with the stabilizer humming steadily across space, humanity took its first real step into the wider galaxy, not through power, but through cooperation. And the journey ahead was only just beginning. The days after the cosmic event passed slowly, but there was a strange calm in the air. People on Earth were still nervous, but they were no longer lost in fear. Everyone had seen the moment when humans and the Dominion worked side by side to stop the danger that could have affected both regions of space. That single event changed everything. It didn't solve every problem, but it opened a door that no one had expected. The human negotiation team, which had once felt like guests who might be removed at any moment, now found themselves welcomed into the meeting hall of the Dominion's Council. The hall looked different this time. The lights felt softer, the voices around them calmer, and the atmosphere less tense. It felt as if the whole place had taken a deep breath and decided to listen before judging. The human representatives stood quietly, watching the council members arrive one by one. Some of them were the same figures who had first confronted the humans with suspicion. Back then, their expressions had been sharp and defensive. Now their faces looked thoughtful, almost curious. It made the representative feel hopeful, but cautious too. A mistake had brought humans into this part of space, and only patience could help them leave the right way. When the meeting started, one of the senior council members spoke first. Their voice carried across the room, steady and calm. They explained that the Dominion now understood the crossing was unintentional. The star charts had been different, the sensors unfamiliar, and the border invisible to human technology. They acknowledged that humans had stepped into a region they did not understand, not because they wanted to cause trouble, but because they were explorers trying to learn. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off the shoulders of the human team. For weeks, they had lived with the fear that any misunderstanding could lead to a negative outcome for their entire planet. They had carried the pressure of knowing that one small mistake could shape the future of their whole species. Now, for the first time, it seemed like the Dominion truly saw them not as invaders, but as people trying to find their place in the universe. But the Council had more to say. They talked about how important it was to build trust slowly. They explained that their borders existed for reasons humans couldn't fully understand yet. The Dominion wasn't just one species. It was a huge collection of worlds, each with its own rules and history. Some of those worlds had faced difficult times, and they protected their space. Because they believed safety came from careful boundaries, the human representative nodded respectfully. They understood the message. Humans had always been curious, sometimes so curious that they rushed into new environments without fully grasping the risks. This had happened countless times throughout Earth's history. Now it had happened on a much bigger scale. The council then moved to the topic everyone had been waiting for. What would happen next? Soft hum filled the hall as a central screen lit up. It displayed a map of space, with the Dominion's borders drawn like shimmering threads of light. For the first time, the humans saw the region where they had wandered, clearly marked and explained in the Dominion's language. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot. It meant the Dominion trusted humans enough to share something important. Then came the real surprise. The Dominion announced that Earth would be granted limited access to certain areas of their space. Not all regions, not the most sensitive zones, but enough to begin a controlled relationship. It was something between a permission and an invitation. The Council said humans had shown cooperation, creativity, and courage during the cosmic event. That kind of contribution could not be ignored. The human team exchanged quiet, relieved glances. This outcome was better than anything they had dared to imagine just a few weeks ago. Instead of being rejected or kept at a distance, Earth was being allowed to join a larger world carefully, slowly, but genuinely. The Council also announced that the captured human crew would be returned home with full dignity. Their stay in Dominion space would not be treated as a punishment, but as a learning exchange. In fact, the Council planned to send a small group of their own observers to Earth as well. Not to control anything, but to understand humans better. They wanted to see how humans lived, built, created, and dreamed. It was a mutual agreement meant to build trust from both sides. When the meeting ended, the human representatives stepped outside the hall with lighter hearts. One of them took a long breath, looking at the stars outside the window. They had felt heavy for so long that the feeling of relief almost surprised them. It felt unreal. A journey that had started with panic and confusion was finally moving toward hope. Back on Earth, people waited for news with restless energy. Everyone had followed the updates, discussions, and rumors. Now, when the message finally arrived, people gathered around screens, radios, and community centers. Families, students, workers, and elders all listened as the announcement was made. The message was simple but powerful. The Dominion understood. The humans were safe. Cooperation had begun. The reaction was emotional. Some people cried out of relief. Others simply sat down as if the tension in their bodies finally released. Governments across the world issued statements thanking the negotiation team and the captured crew for enduring the pressure with patience. Scientists celebrated the chance to study new star charts and learn from Dominion technology. Everyday people felt proud that humanity had handled an unfamiliar situation with calm and respect. The returning crew's journey home became one of the most watched events on the planet. When their ship finally appeared in Earth's sky, people gathered on rooftops and open fields just to see a small light move across the clouds. It wasn't about the ship itself. It was about what it represented, a peaceful ending to a difficult moment. When the crew stepped out, they didn't look like heroes in the usual dramatic sense. They looked like ordinary humans who had survived something extraordinary. Their faces were tired, but their eyes held the kind of relief that came from knowing they were home again. Reporters asked them what they had learned. Instead of giving dramatic statements, they simply said humans should stay curious, but also humble. The galaxy was bigger than anyone had imagined. Over the following weeks, Earth prepared for the arrival of the Dominion observers. People wondered what they would look like, how they would react to human culture, and whether they would enjoy the simple things humans took for granted like blue skies, running water, or the sound of crowds in city streets at the same time. Small groups of human scientists and explorers began training for future cooperative missions. They were told to carry patience, honesty, and caution with them. The experience of the first accidental crossing had taught. everyone that exploring space wasn't just about discovering new worlds. It was also about understanding the feelings and boundaries of those who already lived there. Humanity didn't gain everything, but they didn't lose anything either. They gained something far more important than territory or power. They gained a chance to build trust, a chance to explore the universe respectfully, a chance to grow. The events remained a reminder that even mistakes can lead to positive outcomes when handled with understanding and open communication. The story of humans wandering into a vast, unknown dominion started with fear, but ended with connection. In the end, the real victory wasn't about winning anything. It was about learning that the universe didn't have to be a place of distance and suspicion. It could be a place where different worlds helped each other, shared knowledge, and protected the stars together. Humans had stepped into the unknown and found something they never expected: a future shared across the galaxy, built not on strength, but on cooperation and respect. And that was enough to change the story of humanity forever.